Welcome to Forum 360. Thank you for joining us for a global outlook with a local view. I'm Leslie Unger, your host today. There is a saying, an expert is someone who is more than 50 miles from home. This saying comes to mind when I think about the Bliss Institute. Akron and the rest of the world. Nationally and internationally, much of the world sees the Bliss Institute as a gem. How is the Bliss Institute positioned to the world inside of that 50-mile radius? The Institute of Applied Politics was named to honor Ray C. Bliss. I remember as a little girl, my parents were so proud when we drove past his house. My dad would point out, that's where Ray Bliss lives, chairman of the Republican National Committee. You take a national figure and an idea, and poof, the Bliss Institute was born in 1986. Bipartisan, dedicated to increasing the understanding of the political process, offering hands-on learning through internships and events. It's our pleasure today to welcome Dr. Cherie Strachan, Director of the Bliss Institute. Welcome to Forum 360.
Thank you, thank you.
Now, I want to look at both the Bliss Institute and your journey to get to this point as leader of this institute. But first, can you help us gain a better understanding of the institute?
Certainly.
So let's start there.
Certainly. So
I know it was way before your time here when it started, but why was the Bliss Institute created to begin with?
I think because Ray Bliss was committed to do good things. He was committed to doing good things and to leaving a legacy. He was an Akron alum. He felt like he learned much of what he knew about organizing and much of what made him successful at the university, not only in the classrooms, but by being active in student life, by being active in a fraternity, learning the art of organizing, basically. And he was when he came back from DC and was focused again on Akron, he was a University of Akron trustee. And I think he felt it was very important that students learn not simply political science, right? But that they learn how to participate in politics, and that the community, right? That we serve not only our students but the broader community. And so much of what we do is focused on fulfilling his wishes, that his legacy be that we help facilitate civic and political participation through hands-on experiential learning, hence the applied in our title.
Now, we hear a lot, especially when there's a presidential debate, we'll hear a lot, like President Reagan couldn't even get elected today, meaning that the politics has changed so much. But why was he was chairman of the Republican National Party, so why was he interested in something that was bipartisan?
Well, because I think the era that Ray Bliss came from, he recognized that we have to have legitimate opposition. A one-party system where there is no legitimate opposition, absolute power corrupts absolutely, right? We say that all the time in American politics. And if you hold power for too long, even people who are well-intentioned can learn very quickly to abuse their power. And I think Ray Bliss came from that strong tradition of understanding that what makes American democracy work is having a strong two-party system and being, ideas get better when you're challenged, budgets get better when they're scrutinized. Elections are, we elect the best candidates when they're competitive and people have to prove themselves and talk about their ideas. And so, he wasn't afraid of that competition. He embraced it and realized that we are better when we have legitimate opposition that's organized.
Okay, that makes sense to me. Now, how, for the longest time, I thought of the Bliss Institute and the University of Akron, but I didn't really realize that they're intertwined. So how are they intertwined? Like if you're attending the Bliss Institute, then you're attending the University of Akron? How are they intertwined?
So the Bliss Institute, and we have endowments, so we are endowed. So what we do comes from the endowments. It doesn't come from the university's budget or from taxpayer dollars. It comes through the endowed funds that Ray Bliss left. and that we fundraised around his legacy. And so we have a mission that focuses both on offering courses and offering internships and experiences for students, but we also offer experiences for the community. And so some of what we do, you'll see us out and active in the community, or we helped pay for example, the public opinion polls about the mayoral campaign, so that we would make sure we had informed debates and discussion, with a really important mayoral election. So sometimes we're out doing those things that help educate the public and bring the public into good citizenship. But we also offer courses. We also offer certificates, for example, in applied politics. We offer a master's degree in applied politics. And those are offered in cooperation with the political science department.
In cooperation. So when you say applied politics, what does that mean? So
applied politics, the notion that Bliss had was, there's political science and there's coursework and theory where we talk to other academics, talk to each other about theoretical things and findings, but things that are important for students to know about how to sustain a democracy, or how democracies work at a more abstract or theoretical level, like in a lecture. But that doesn't necessarily teach you the art of organizing, right? That doesn't teach you how to persuade voters, how to run a registration drive, how to be articulate when you go or participate in a debate or need to speak with constituents. And so we also, in addition to some courses offered by political science professors, the Bliss Institute uses some of our endowment money to hire professors of practice. And those professors of practice, they have a graduate degree typically, so that they're qualified to teach a college level class, but they're consultants. They're people who work in campaigns, they're people who work in the industry.
So they're getting a real life.
And so our students actually learn that art of organizing from people who are in the field and doing the work. And there are very few other programs in the United States that offer a Master's of Applied Politics, and the only few that are remaining are in Washington, D.C., at very expensive universities where it's very expensive to live. We are the only Masters of Applied Politics at a regional public that's affordable, and in the Midwest.
Now, you may have to walk more on eggs about this than I probably have to, but the last 6-8 years, I think, have shown some flaws in the American constituency. And it seems to me one of them is how little people really understand how their own democracy works. We never really had to know. And I don't know, not to point fingers, but until you know what's failed, was it in elementary school, should they have learned? Was it in junior high or middle school? Was it in high school? Where is the failing to understand how our own country is supposed to work?
So this is interesting because I was, in fact, hired. So my predecessor, John Green, his focus was, one of his areas of expertise was on political parties and campaigns and elections. And you can see that footprint, that legacy footprint in what our legacy programs, our legacy degrees are. My own research about applied politics has been in how do we cultivate good public-spirited citizenship? How do we come back to that sort of Tocquevillian sense of civic identity?
How do we?
Well, and so I promised that I would add that layer back. We keep all the legacy programs. I mean, I was an alum of those programs. So we keep all those legacy programs because they're important, but we add in a layer that focuses on the cultivation of citizenship. I teach a whole class. It's hard to condense this down. I teach a whole class on foundations of civic engagement. And we talk about how the sources of robust political socialization have been eroded since the 1960s. We talk about how the changes in communication technology and sort of the changes in just technology and life in general have actually exacerbated the civic skills. Like we need better civic skills now, right, to process propaganda and sort through multiple news sources. So I take my students through all of that in a class, and then we go back and we practice the civic skills that are missing, or talk and explore ways to put them back.
Now, is one of those, I think most people can see it on an individual basis, or they can see it at home, or they can see it with their friends, and we see it on a national basis of people not knowing what source to believe or believing everything. Is that a part of learning how to be an engaged, active member
Yes.
in a democracy?
It is now. Yeah, it is now so much more important. One of the things that we've done, for example, in cooperation with the political science department, is the political science department, for example, now has right now it's just voluntary for our students because we're piloting it. But the chair of political science put in place a weekly quiz on current events. There are, this is not partisan, this is not biased, this is just learning to rely on multiple news sources and sorting your way through it to know what the factual, and we can disagree all day long about what to do with factual information. And we can approach solutions or whether or not we want to take any action from many different ideological perspectives. But we have to come to some common understanding of what the circumstances are. And so that's a weekly quiz that we've put in place that all of our students enrolled in political science classes are encouraged to take.
Do you know it all? How do they do overall?
Well, we're piloting
more failing or more passing?
We're piloting this right now, so I don't have that data yet. But if
come
you
back
ask
when you
me,
do, okay?
Yeah, if you ask me next semester,
Okay.
I'll know.
So let's take a look at your mission statement. First, bipartisan. What does that mean to a student?
Well, what that means to a student is, there's actually research in my field of civic engagement that it is absolutely possible to encourage people to develop a robust civic identity, right? Where you have a sense of obligation, a sense of civic duty, a sense that I am the kind of person who's supposed to pay attention, I'm supposed to process what's happening in my political environment, and I'm supposed to help solve these problems so that you're socialized and then has also been taught the skill set for how to participate, right? Everything from registering to vote to community organizing to being able to write a letter to a member of Congress. And you can increase people's likelihood of participating in civic and political life without changing their ideological orientation. And so we need to make sure our students trust us that they will not, anything that I have them do that they're learning how to do, it has nothing to do with their ideological preferences and everything to do with their capacity to be good participatory citizens.
So I found it interesting. My sister lives in Arizona, so I get a little bit more information about Arizona than I probably would. The last 3 elections, they've had a very high percentage of young people vote, more than most other states. Now, from the time I can barely remember Bobby Kennedy Sr. running for president, the challenge was you get young people involved in campaigning and going door to door, but then they don't vote. So Arizona got them to vote. What does it take to go from engagement or understanding to get people to vote?
So one of the things is cultivating the intrinsic identity, right? So you can poke and prod people to vote, and we can have, and some of these things work, and there's a much bigger movement to have these kinds of learning experiences on college campuses now. We're required, for example, public universities are required by the Help America Votes Act to ensure that our students are aware of the registration process and that they know, right? We can have nonpartisan voter registration drives and help make sure our students understand the process. And that's actually helped increase young people turning out because just having information readily available to them is useful. But what you really want to do is I don't want to contact my students. I would love to contact them 15 years from now after they're out to find out how they're doing and to have a nice conversation. But I don't want to have to be the one that's poking and prodding them about what issues they care about what the solutions should be. I want them to be people who can carry this democracy forward without my involvement. And so you have to, in addition to the skills, you have to engage in experiences that cultivate this intrinsic identity. One of the other things we've done this fall is we're using our funded graduate students, thank you Ray Bliss, for the funding to support master's students. And so they spend 20 hours a week working for the university. And what they're doing is facilitating deliberative discussion sessions in one of our Intro to American Government classes. The research shows that if peers, other young people, expect you to be aware of a public issue, be informed, engage in reason giving to solve it, and if they and right now the students in our undergraduate class are doing that because they're getting a grade. They're graded on deliberation, civility, coming to class prepared, and attending, not on their policy preference. But if they hold each other accountable to being that kind of person, even right now because they're getting a grade, but it's peer accountability, it cultivates a decade later higher levels of civic and political participation because your peers have made it clear, I expect you to be that kind of person. So using the resources of the Bliss Institute to weave in as many of those kinds of experiences where students not only learn how to register to vote, not only learn, these are the mechanisms, but cultivate that public-spirited sense of civic obligation, then we know that they'll participate. The research shows, right? They will participate for the rest of their adult lives.
Today we are having a conversation with the new director at the Bliss Institute at the University of Akron, Dr. Cherie Strachan. So in your mission statement, it also says dedicated to increasing understanding of the political process. There's a saying you probably heard that a non-believer knocked at Hillel's door and said, tell me everything I need to know about the Bible while I'm standing on one foot. And that's where we get the do unto others. Right? The rest is mere commentary. So if you were standing on one foot, what does either a student or really anybody need to know about the political process? Or what would they know differently about the political process after being at the Bliss Institute than they were before?
Oh gosh, if I had to put it in one, in a motto.
While standing on one foot.
While standing on one foot, if you don't do politics, politics will do you.
That is one I have not heard. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, if we create a power vacuum, we will have elections and people will win with 50% of the vote if it's a minuscule proportion of the electorate. People with other agendas other than what we want to have happen will step in and seize power. The government's not going to disappear. So if we don't control what happens, how we're taxed, how the tax dollars are spent, the kinds of policies and programs that we have, who gets the cookies, right? Budgets or value documents. If we don't participate, that process is still going to happen, and it will not be pretty if we let other people do it for us.
As an executive coach, the way I say it is nothing good happens in a vacuum of leadership, right?
That's right.
Offering hands-on learning through internships and events. So what kind of hands-on learning, and why does it matter to be hands-on?
It matters to be hands-on because the best political socialization, and one of the things that's been ripped away, and I teach a whole class on this, but one of the things that's been ripped away is, the best political socialization was participation in voluntary associations. Not coached, not mentored, not tutored, not run by someone, who's getting grant money for an executive salary to run a nonprofit, but those deliberative, old-fashioned voluntary associations where people learned Robert's rules, learned how to use bylaws, understood democracy right from the inside out because they were using democratic practices to run their civic voluntary associations. That's always been the best predictor in the United States, back to the 17 and 1800s, of how people learned how to participate. So the best political socialization on campus, you'll get knowledge and information about why that's important, and have conversations about it, but you won't actually really learn how to do it, right? And learning how to do it is just as important as understanding why.
We must not merely know, we must know and do.
That's right. And the students coming to us now have had, we've had just decades of those kinds of hands-on activities being replaced by top-down, not just for students, right, but for adults as well, even in workplaces and in other. We've had nonprofits with grant-funded sort of leadership as opposed to citizen deliberative processes kind of take over. And so the students are coming to us with fewer and fewer experiences that provide that robust training. It's even more important now that we give that back to them through, I'm doing it largely at the college level. It needs to happen everywhere, but at least students who come from college with a degree should understand and have the skill set and the knowledge of how to step back in and be civic and political leaders.
Now, you were Director of Community Engagement at the VCU, Virginia Commonwealth University. Richmond's a beautiful area, right? You had been to the University of Akron, you got a degree at the University of Akron, but what brought you back to Akron, and what do people sitting in an academic office in Virginia or wherever, what do they know or think about the Bliss Institute?
Well, the Bliss Institute has a huge reputation across the country and increasingly internationally. Because of the things that we can do with the Bliss Institute, because of the endowment, are things that are hard to fund or figure out how to support at other universities. And so that's why I was attracted to come back. I'm from the Midwest. My family's from Michigan, so it was good to be back home.
Are you allowed to say that at Ohio University?
I'm in Ohio now, and my loyalties have shifted, but my family's in Michigan. And so coming back to the Midwest was a happy decision for me. But the resources of the Bliss Institute, think about the stress of higher education. Nobody owns civic engagement, right? There's not a single department where we should teach students how to be good citizens. So when you have tight budgets or programs that need to be eliminated or limited faculty to teach the core things for something that needs to be taught to keep a program like nursing or something like that accredited, it goes hungry. And everybody wants civic engagement to happen, but most universities don't have the resources to do the kind of high visibility, well-supported programming like the Bliss Institute can do. And that was the thing that was so tempting for me, is to come back and develop those programs, develop best practices, and show them to the rest of the world.
Now, you've only been here about a year and a half, but what would you say, or how would you say the Bliss Institute is different a year and a half after you've been in place as director than it was before?
So the one thing that's different is we are now really starting to layer in. The Bliss Institute has historically, and I think this is appropriate, and it's because we're responding to changes in the broader political environment. The Bliss Institute historically lived up to its mission by teaching people how to be campaign professionals, political professionals, our Masters of Applied Politics, and our internships were guiding people to be government affairs, to work in Columbus, to work in DC, but to step into professions and careers that make the mechanisms of democracy work. And they're important careers because we don't have democracy without elections. Somebody has to run them. But given what we're facing in the country right now, it's really important to layer in a focus on citizenship, getting people to live up to civic identity when politics is rough and raw and caustic is harder. It's harder to keep people engaged and involved. And so, shifting and bringing in some of these citizenship-focused initiatives, I think, is the thing that's different.
In just the couple minutes I have remaining, it's gone very, very fast, and it's not fair to ask you in a couple words, but I'm still going to do it. The Bliss Institute talks about raising civility. How do you do it in this polarized world? How do you raise civility?
We do it through the deliberative discussion sessions and modeling for our students how to have conversations where they learn how to disagree without name calling, to disagree without over talking and interrupting on both sides, right? That everybody needs to do that.
Yes.
And yeah.
Now you say that committed to curriculum and programming designed to help students become the civic and political leaders that our democracy needs. What kind, in a sentence, what kind of leaders does our democracy need?
Thoughtful, reason-giving, pragmatic.
Okay. Now, Akron, as of January, Akron will have a young mayor. Cleveland has a young mayor. Columbus has a young mayor. Cincinnati has a young mayor. What does that mean to our future?
I mean, one of the things I was so impressed about when I really moved back to Akron. I got my master's degree here, left and did all sorts of other things. But one of the things that I remembered and sort of came to fruition to me was the rich civic infrastructure. Akron's done a really good job of sustaining those voluntary associations that give people civic skills and identity. You see that with all these young people stepping forward.
And in a word or two, you came from Richmond. You were just there a year, but it's beautiful, to Akron. What is one thing that surprised you about the area when you came?
Just how engaged and involved the community is.
What is one thing that would surprise us about our area that we may not know?
Oh my goodness. I mean, I don't think this is a surprise to anyone else, but Akron's a great place. The Northeast Ohio is fabulous. The parks, the climate, the water.
Yes.
You know, I just have been really enjoying the change of seasons. I just think people go out and enjoy your parks.
Have you binged anything on any platform lately?
No, I have been too busy.
And your favorite person in history, if you could talk to your favorite person in history, who would that be?
My favorite person in history, probably Ruth Bader Ginsburg.
I was just talking about her this morning. Today we learned about a national gem in Akron called the Bliss Institute. We learned why a bipartisan research, teaching, and experiential learning institute is important to Northeast Ohio and the rest of the world. And we learned why it's important that this woman, Dr. Cherie Strachan, is the director. We look forward to her strengths to build upon our civic culture, civility, and ethics to help repair our world. In Hebrew, it's actually called Tikkun Olam, repairing the world. I'm Leslie Unger. Thank you for joining us today on Forum 360 with a local view.
Forum 360 is brought to you by John S. and James L. Knight Foundation, the Akron Community Foundation, Hudson Community Television, the Rubber City Radio Group, Shaw Jewish Community Center of Akron, Blue Green, Electric Impulse Communications, and Forum 360 supporters.